Show name, LeoBunny, where spirit meets science, gently, from Japan. Episode title, Who Else is in the Room?
On people who don't quite feel like one person. This audio commentary explores a podcast originally delivered by LeoBunny, a spiritual practitioner from Japan. Through the three lenses of spirituality, metacognition, and philosophy, we analyze how to apply these insights to our everyday reality.
So, have you ever met someone who, seemed perfectly nice on the surface, but gave off this underlying, completely different vibe?
Oh, absolutely. Like a low-level hum you just can't quite place.
Right. Or maybe you've looked at someone you've known for years, and just in a fleeting moment, you felt like you were looking at a complete stranger.
Yeah, it is a really profound, almost universal moment of dissonance. The surface presentation simply does not match the depth of what you're observing. But, most of the time we just brush it off as exhaustion.
Yeah, we tell ourselves we're just imagining things, right?
Exactly. We think, oh, I'm just misinterpreting it.
Well, today we are taking a deep dive into the possibility that you aren't imagining it at all. We're exploring the insights of LeoBunny, and she proposes a concept that, honestly, it completely upends how we view human identity.
It really does.
She suggests that a human being isn't just a single fixed consciousness. What we call a person might actually be a collection of frequencies, or even a literal team of souls sharing one physical vessel.
Which fundamentally challenges our attachment to the idea of the I as this, singular, solid monolith. And what makes her perspective so compelling is how she connects ancient Japanese spiritual traditions with concepts that just map flawlessly onto modern cognitive science.
And Western philosophy, too.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So the way she pieces this together is just fascinating. It begins pretty casually. She was watching an NHK television program about ancient Japanese beliefs regarding the origins of children's souls.
Okay, yeah.
And the belief was that a baby's soul doesn't actually originate in the womb. Instead, it comes from nature, specifically from the sea or, from the mountains.
So the underlying premise there is that the soul and the physical body are treated as two distinct entities. They have entirely different origins. They are not just one inseparable unit from conception.
Right. And the ancient tradition involved these perfectly round stones that they kept at shrines. The belief was that a soul would temporarily inhabit one of these round stones. It functioned almost like a waiting room.
A waiting room for a soul, wow.
Yeah. An expectant mother would actually borrow the stone, bring it home, and just place it nearby. And only then would the soul leave the stone and enter the baby's body to begin the human experience.
From a mechanistic standpoint, stones are these dense, really grounding materials. In a lot of traditions, they're viewed as capable of anchoring an energetic frequency before it transitions into a fragile biological vessel.
That makes a lot of sense.
It sets up this framework where the physical body is basically the hardware, and consciousness is a totally separate installation altogether.
Exactly. And so, if ancient traditions used earthen materials, like stones, as temporary holding cells for souls, it logically follows they would use other clay or earthen objects to manipulate those energies.
Right.
Which brings us to LeoBunny's experience with the Shakoki-dogu.
Ah, yes. The clay figures.
Yeah. For those listening who haven't seen one, these are ancient Japanese clay figures, and they look highly unusual. They have these big, goggle-like eyes, elaborate, almost geometric patterns all over them. And historically, archaeologists almost always find them intentionally broken.
Which is such a weird detail. The mainstream historical consensus has generally interpreted them as ritualistic objects. Like, a lot of historians believe they were used as talismans or protective charms for safe childbirth.
Right, and maybe broken as part of a completion ritual when the baby is born safely.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, LeoBunny decided to test this theory. She went to a museum, stood right in front of a Shakoki-dogu, and just tuned into its energy. And she felt this incredibly bright, shiny, sacred energy that felt exactly like a prayer for safe childbirth.
Oh.
Yeah, so at first, she thought, okay, the historians were completely right. But then she read the placard. She was actually looking at a replica.
A replica.
It was a modern creation, sculpted by people who firmly believed its purpose was for safe childbirth.
Oh, that is fascinating. So the replica was just holding the modern intention. It was a vessel reflecting the collective frequency of the modern historians and the artists who, projected that specific meaning onto it.
Exactly. But later, she visits the Ueno Museum in Tokyo, where they actually house a genuine ancient Shakoki-dogu.
Okay, the real deal.
The real deal. She discreetly tunes into it, fully expecting that same bright prayer energy, but she gets hit with something entirely different. She describes it as a much lower, heavier shamanic frequency.
And I think we should probably clarify what a shamanic frequency means in this context, because it doesn't mean malicious or evil.
Right, no, not at all.
In energetic terms, a shamanic frequency is heavy. It's extracting, and it's deeply grounding. Think of it like a poultice that's meant to draw out an infection. It pulls things down and out.
That is the perfect way to describe it. Because the ancient dogu essentially revealed its true original purpose to her. It wasn't a generic good luck charm. It functioned as a vacuum.
A vacuum.
Yeah, it was used to extract bad souls from a child's body. Once that negative soul was transferred to the clay figure, the figure was intentionally broken to dispel the energy.
Which completely flips the mainstream historical consensus right on its head. And, I mean, if you accept the premise of that ancient ritual, you have to accept a pretty staggering implication.
That a single child could harbor a bad soul alongside their normal self.
Right. It implies multiplicity.
And that is the absolute core of LeoBunny's realization. A person isn't a single soul. We operate more like a team. She says usually it's about 3 entities, sometimes 4.
Wow.
I really like to picture it as an internal board of directors running a company. Like, most of the time we just assume there's one CEO making all the decisions, a single eye.
Yeah.
But there's actually an entire team sitting around the conference table in your head.
And if you think about it, if you are a single monolithic soul, extracting it means biological death.
Right, the person dies.
But if you are a board of directors and one member is causing absolute chaos, it is entirely rational to just extract the troublemaker. The ancient ritual was essentially firing a toxic board member.
Firing a toxic board member. I love that. And, it sounds incredibly mystical when it's framed around ancient clay figures. But when we look at how we experience internal conflict, it actually feels very familiar.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when you are totally torn over a major life decision, maybe it isn't just a single mind being indecisive. Maybe it is literally a disagreement in the boardroom.
Yeah, and if we strip away the spiritual vocabulary for a second and look at this strictly through the lens of Western philosophy, LeoBunny's conclusion finds a really surprising parallel.
Oh, really? Which one?
Well, in the 18th century, the Scottish philosopher David Hume proposed what is known as the bundle theory.
Okay, the bundle theory.
Right. So Hume looked inward to try and locate his core self. But he found anger, he found hunger, he found memories. He never found a singular I. He argued that the self as a fixed entity simply does not exist. We are merely a shifting bundle of perceptions and sensations.
Wow. So Hume was articulating centuries ago what LeoBunny intuited from the ancient dogu.
Exactly. And modern neuroscience actually takes it a step further with the concept of the brain's modularity.
How so?
Well, there is no central command center in your brain. There is no single pilot flying the plane. Your brain consists of multiple, highly specialized regions constantly interacting, competing, and collaborating.
So that unified sense of I is just an illusion.
Yeah, it's a post hoc story the brain tells itself to make sense of all these competing neural signals.
That is wild. So when LeoBunny feels these different souls or, members of the team, she's picking up on the reality of our multi-layered nature. She is taking the biological modularity of human consciousness and translating it into an intuitive, energetic vocabulary.
Precisely. She is interpreting the brain's competing signals as different frequencies.
So how does this map to our daily lives? Like, if we are walking around as a team of frequencies, how does that show up when we are just grabbing a coffee or, I don't know, sitting in a meeting?
Well, this brings us to a major focus of her insights, which is the phenomenon of individuals with dual frequencies.
Which we touched on briefly in the beginning, right?
Yeah. This moves the theory from the abstract into the highly practical realm of interpersonal relationships. She observes that some people project 2 distinct frequencies simultaneously.
Like when you meet someone who is, on the surface, genuinely wonderful. They project a high frequency, they're bright, polite, accommodating, but occasionally you catch a glimpse of a dark, unpredictable undercurrent, a low frequency.
Right. And she notes that it isn't that they are faking being nice. The high frequency is completely authentic, but that other frequency is sitting right there beside it, operating at the exact same time.
Okay, hold on. Wait, I'm struggling with this job.
Okay, what's the hang-up?
I mean, couldn't that just be a moody coworker? Or, like, someone hiding a bad temper, Why do we have to leap all the way to multiple consciousnesses or dual frequencies just because someone is having a bad day?
No, that is a very natural question to ask. Like, are we just overcomplicating a grumpy disposition?
Right.
To understand why this isn't just a simple mood swing, we really need to define the metacognitive process happening when you interact with someone.
Okay.
Metacognition is, quite simply, the brain's ability to think about its own thinking and to monitor the vast amounts of subconscious data we process every single second. When LeoBunny talks about sensing dual frequencies, she is describing a highly developed metacognitive awareness.
So walk us through the mechanics of that. What is the brain actually picking up on in that moment?
Well, when you converse with someone, you are consciously listening to their words, right? But subconsciously, your brain is analyzing thousands of micro data points.
Like body language.
Way beyond just standard body language. You are tracking the dilation of their pupils, the microscopic tension in their jaw, tiny fluctuations in the timbre of their voice, their breathing patterns. When someone's internal board of directors is unified, all those signals align perfectly.
But when the board is split, the signals misfire.
Exactly. When a conscious intention to be polite overlaps with a suppressed frustration or, say, an unresolved trauma belonging to a completely different member of the team, those physiological microsignals become deeply inconsistent.
Oh, I see. So the words convey warmth, but the micromuscle tension conveys hostility.
Yes, and your conscious mind cannot process all those conflicting details fast enough, so it synthesizes the data into a single gut feeling, a weird vibe.
The brain just hands you a summary report that says something here does not match.
Exactly.
It's like hearing two radio stations playing at the same time because the dial is stuck right between them. Both songs are playing authentically, but the overlap is just jarring.
That's a great analogy. And LeoBunny is attuned to the friction between those overlapping stations. She invites us to view this human multidimensionality, not as a pathology or something abnormal to be feared, but as a standard energetic reality.
Which is incredibly liberating, honestly.
How so?
Well, if you accept that people are complex chords of multiple frequencies, you stop demanding that everyone be a perfectly consistent, single-note character in the movie of your life.
Yeah, that's so true.
Something as one frequency is just louder than another.
Yeah.
Recognizing that allows for so much more grace and curiosity in how we interact with each other.
You practice metacognitive flexibility. You observe the inconsistency without immediately judging it as malice or deception.
Right. So, okay, we have established that we have this board of directors, this team of frequencies inside us. But LeoBunny explores another scenario that takes this to the next level.
Oh, yes, the mass resignation.
Yeah. What happens if the original board of directors completely resigns? What if the whole team just walks out?
This brings us to the phenomenon of walk-ins, which really represents the most profound application of her theory.
According to LeoBunny, this mass resignation typically happens during moments of extreme physical crisis. We are talking about someone suffering a dangerously high fever or going into sudden cardiac arrest.
Moments where the body is pushed to the absolute brink of death.
Right. And in these critical moments, the original soul, or the original team, determines the environment is no longer viable, and they leave the physical vessel.
But the biological system does not die.
Right.
Instead, a replacement soul, a walk-in, steps in to take over the controls. The hardware of the body is preserved, but the operating system is entirely replaced.
And the evidence she provides for this is fascinating. She notes that people who experience this often wake up from their medical emergency with absolutely no memory of their past life.
None at all.
Or, if they do have memories, they feel completely detached from them, as if they're watching a movie about someone else. They might suddenly hate their favorite foods, lose interest in their lifelong hobbies, or feel literally no emotional connection to their own families.
Well, because the entity currently processing those relationships is quite literally new to the job.
Exactly. But LeoBunny doesn't just rely on their behavioral changes. She claims she can actually spot a walk-in, sometimes even just from looking at a photograph.
Yeah, she looks for a very specific visual mismatch.
A mismatch between the frequency emitted by the physical body and the frequency emitting from the back of the person's eyes.
Yes.
What is the actual mechanism behind that? Like, why do the eyes become the giveaway that the internal team has been swapped out?
Well, think about the anatomy. The eyes are the only part of the central nervous system exposed to the outside world. They are a direct physical extension of the brain. So when a new consciousness or a new team takes over the neural pathways, the way that brain processes incoming light and data fundamentally shifts. This alters the micro-movements of the ocular muscles, the pupillary response, and the exact way a person focuses their gaze.
Oh, wow. So the biological structure of the eye remains identical, but the cognitive mapping driving it has completely changed.
Precisely. The physical body is emitting the heavy, familiar frequency of its genetics and its accumulated physical life. But the gaze, the way the eyes are engaging with the world, is broadcasting an entirely different, newly installed frequency.
It creates an energetic friction that a sensitive practitioner can visually identify.
Exactly.
It really reminds me of the classic philosophical paradox of the Ship of Theseus.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect fit.
Right. For anyone unfamiliar, if you have a famous wooden ship, and over the years you replace every single rotting plank until no original pieces of wood remain, is it still the Ship of Theseus? The walk-in phenomenon is basically the inverse of that paradox. The planks, the face, the fingerprints, the DNA are exactly the same. But the sailors manning the ship have been entirely swapped out. Are they the same person?
And from a societal, legal, and biological standpoint, we treat them as the same person. But energetically and metacognitively, LeoBunny argues they are fundamentally not.
You would expect a concept like this to sound terrifying. I mean, it borders on the plot of a sci-fi thriller about body snatchers.
Yeah, it sounds like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Exactly. But the tone she uses to describe the walk-in experience isn't malicious or scary at all.
No, not at all. She frames it as a calm, orderly handover. It is not a hostile takeover where an invading spirit forces the original out. If we view this through a cosmic or even just a purely biological lens, it is the profound adaptation.
Because the physical vessel is failing.
Exactly. The original consciousness could no longer sustain the connection required to keep the heart beating and the lungs breathing.
So rather than let the biological system collapse completely, a new team steps in. The universe doesn't waste a perfectly viable, recovering physical vessel. It just assigns a new crew to manage it.
A cosmic shift change. The previous team clocks out, and the new team takes the wheel.
That is so wild.
It strips away the fear surrounding identity and replaces it with awe at the sheer resilience of life. It forces us to decouple identity from biology. Your DNA dictates the physical shape of your eye, but it does not necessarily dictate the consciousness looking out through it.
Our mission today was to explore this incredible perspective from LeoBunny, and honestly, by looking through her unique lens, we get to strip away a massive cultural bias.
Which one?
The bias that a human being must be one consistent, solid, monolithic entity?
Yes. We are fluid, we are complex layers of interacting systems, we are boards of directors that sometimes disagree, and we are vessels that might occasionally undergo a total management change. Realizing this provides a whole new tool for interpreting reality. It takes the friction out of human interaction. When you stop expecting singularity from the people around you, you stop being disappointed by their multiplicity.
So well said. So here is a direct call to action for you listening right now. Later today, or the next time you are talking to someone, maybe that coworker, who always gives you slightly mixed signals, or even just when you are looking at yourself in the mirror brushing your teeth, try a little metacognitive training.
It's just a little experiment.
Yeah. Ask yourself, who exactly is in the room right now? What frequencies are present? Don't try to fix them. Don't judge them, just notice them. It is a way to interpret your reality more richly and honestly with a lot more curiosity.
It changes the entire texture of a conversation when you realize you might be addressing a committee rather than an individual.
It really does. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over what you go about the rest of your day. We started this whole deep dive by asking if you've ever looked at someone and felt like you were looking at a completely different person.
Right.
But if our consciousness is just a temporary team sharing a physical vessel, if the self is just a shifting bundle of perceptions and frequencies, who is the you that is listening to this right now? Are you the CEO of your internal team calling all the shots? Or are you just the board member who happens to be holding the microphone today?
How was today's episode? If it sparked something, there's a 5-step workbook waiting for you. About 30 minutes, pen and paper only. Head to the show page to grab it. The newest episode's workbook is always pay what you want, and past ones are just $3 in the archive. Link in the show notes. See you next time.